We are really excited to bring a new series to our channel this month called Freeze Dry February. Freeze drying has really become such a big part on our homestead over the past 4 years. We've freeze dried a lot of different foods and learned a lot along the way. Freeze drying really has become a game changer for us. It saves us time, money, and keeps foods fresh for months or even years and completely shelf stable. But now it's our turn to share a bit more of what we've learned with you. During the month of February, we'll be sharing different freeze-dried foods, tips and tricks, what to do and what not to do, and so much more. Our first video this month, we're going to dive into the world of freeze-drying fresh vegetables, such as green beans, a variety of peppers, and homemade tomato sauce. We hope you'll learn a lot from this video.
We have a lot going on in the kitchen today. Got some things on the stovetop here we're canning. There's some things we may be putting in the freezer. And then I have these baskets of peppers here. A lot of them are jalapeno peppers, but just a variety of different peppers that we are going to put in the freeze dryer today. We don't eat a lot of peppers like in a week or even in a month, but we do put them into recipes throughout the winter, especially into some soups like chilies and things like that. So we're going to preserve these using the freeze dryer, and then I can just pull out a handful and throw into whatever soup or stew or chili or recipe that I'm using. I also have some green beans that I'm going to put those in the freeze dryer as well.
Over the years, I have learned that the first step in freeze drying is always to turn on and warm up that freeze dryer. It's a 15-minute process, and this just ensures that your freeze dryer is ready to go when you are done prepping those veggies. A warmed up freeze dryer cuts back on excess waiting time, so get that started. Now, for this freeze drying cycle today, we're doing green beans, which I have already washed. And you saw I snapped them and put them on the trays at the beginning of this video. Next, I am doing peppers, and I'm working with jalapeno peppers and bell peppers today. Some people prefer to wear gloves when they're handling jalapenos and peppers to avoid irritation on their hands, or if you have an open cut or something like even a little paper cut, it's really going to sting. And also that way maybe you don't touch your eyes or your mouth and accidentally transfer that heat to other parts of your body. I've learned over the years that I do not leave my seeds in my peppers at all. I'll take a spoon and pull as many of those seeds out. Seeds often don't dry in the same amount of time that your peppers dry, and so then when you put those peppers into a bag, the moisture of the seeds will then ruin those peppers and can cause mold or mildew. So no seeds in your freeze dryer. Pull them out of your peppers, and then you can just put all those peppers onto your freeze drying tray. Now, you don't have to worry about if you are mixing different types of peppers or really different types of foods very often. Stronger flavored foods like peppers and onions, a lot of people don't like to run their freeze dryer with other types of foods. So, for instance, if you were doing jalapeno peppers that were super spicy, somebody might not want to put their strawberries in with that. I personally have never really seen the effects of that altering the taste of my foods, but then I typically am putting 3 trays of peppers and 2 trays of onions or something like that into the freeze dryer. I typically am not freeze drying fruit at the same time I'm freeze drying vegetables. So that's just my own personal experience. When it comes to larger peppers like bell peppers, I tend to slice them in the way that my family will consume them. So, for instance, sometimes I will slice them into julienne slices. Sometimes I'll slice them into quarters. Sometimes I will cut them into 1 inch pieces. This just depends on how I plan to use those peppers. If I'm going to put them into a stir fry that I usually use 1 inch chunks, I'll throw them in that. If I'm going to put them into a breakfast casserole and I just want tiny pieces, I might have a bag of peppers that are cut into tiny pieces. So the way that you consume your peppers might be the way that you cut them and place them on the freeze dryer for the most efficient use in the future for your family. Now, while these peppers and green beans were being prepped, I actually had some tomato sauce on the stovetop that was cooking down that I didn't really want to finish canning. So I decided that I was just going to freeze dry the remaining tomato sauce with this cycle in the freeze dryer. Um, because it's cooking down, it's cooking out some of that water, but the freeze dryer will cook the rest of that. I guess cook's not the right word, but will pull the rest of that moisture out so that that tomato sauce becomes kind of this foamy, crunchy end product that oftentimes you can blend down and put into a jar. When I add the tomato sauce to the freeze dryer, you'll see that I pull the tray out and then I pour the liquid into the tray. This, I have learned, just helps to prevent messes. And I always watch and make sure that I don't fill more than halfway on my tray. Otherwise, sometimes the liquids will bubble up and you'll just have this huge mess in your freeze dryer. So take it from me, pour your liquids right into your trays in your freeze dryer. Don't try and transport them. Any liquid, eggs, sauces, stews, soups, anything like that. Once those trays are loaded, we're going to close up that freeze dryer and wait until it tells us it's time to pull everything out. We often get the question of how long does it take to freeze dry, insert food here? I can't actually give you an answer to that because every food is different. Every home is different. Every environment is different based on the season, how hot it is, how cold it is, how much humidity there might be. There's so many factors that affect freeze drying. And one time I might freeze dry peppers and it'll take 12 hours, and another time I might take 24 hours or more. So there really isn't a rhyme or reason to how long it's going to take. It really is just based on what the freeze dryer is telling you and your experience with working with freeze dried foods. When I pull freeze dried foods out of my freeze dryer, I'm looking for crunchy foods. I don't want them soft, I don't want them wet, and I don't want them cold. If they are cold, then that means they probably still have some moisture in them. I want them to be dry and pretty warm. And on the freeze dryer, there is a button that says warm trays when your freeze drying cycle gets done. And that warm tray button is really useful in helping heat those trays up so that when you're feeling your finished product, it's nice and dry and not cold or soft. So that's just a tip to help you out. Now, for me, for these different veggies that we are storing today, some are going into Mylar bags and some are going into mason jars. My mason jars I am going to use pretty quickly, like usually within the next month. If I'm not, I put them in Mylar bags to store down into our food storage closet downstairs in our basement. But if I'm putting them in a mason jar, they're typically going to be used pretty quickly, and I'll add an oxygen absorber, and that will keep them fresh until I get to them in the next couple of weeks. For the tomato sauce, I mentioned this earlier, but it is going to come out in this giant, basically looks like a piece of foam, and you can put that into a blender and blend it down, and it will make a real fine powder that you can put in a mason jar and then use as spoonfuls of basically tomato paste that you can add to your recipes, your soups and stews, your casseroles. So that's a great way to use it up quickly. For us, we're just going to store this long term, and I was feeling a little bit lazy, so I literally am just breaking it into chunks and throwing it into a giant Mylar bag so they'll all be in there. And over time, I can crunch it down or I can pull it out when I need it and put it into a fine powder, or reconstitute it to make a spaghetti sauce or whatever I want to use it for. But there are lots of different ways that you can store things, whether in a Mylar bag or in a mason jar. Your freeze-dried food is going to stay fresh as long as you add your oxygen absorber or use a vacuum seal to pull out that excess air and to prevent any kind of moisture. Once everything is packaged, it's time to put it on the shelf. It's ready to use over the next several months or even years. Freeze drying really has helped our family save a lot of money and reduce our food waste, which we really appreciate. Plus, it's a great way for us to preserve the harvest in our garden when we work so hard. If you have questions about freeze drying, make sure to leave them down in the comments, and be sure to check out the description for more tips, links, and resources. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.